This and you are. Have fun, take a deep breath. Give them hell at the end. You like this? Fight like hell like we do every week. You are the best here. Brett, be affirmative. You told me to get on. Info. Ready. Ready. Go slow. Green, green, green. Lock it down, lock it down. 14. I'm destroyed, and I just got drove through like 6 times on the 14. So, excuse me, thank you. That is the stupidest thing I've seen in my career. Literally.
Everything you described is accurate. Haven't even finished the second stage yet. Half the field's wrecked.
Hell yeah! 11 got it.
Rowdy there, Mac. Good job, pal. Thanks, man. Good job all day.
Great work, my man. Great work. Keep putting yourself in position. We'll win our share, right? We got one back today, brother. Good job.
Therefore, great job, guys.
And welcome to a late night Saturday night racing in the draft. My name is Mark, and I've spent all day watching NASCAR racing, and it's been fabulous. I did take some time out to visit with family and friends and stuff, but wow, what a day of racing between all the practice sessions we had, then the truck series, which was better than advertised, and the Xfinity series, which I wasn't sure if we were going to ever have the big one, but with a handful of laps left, they decided to go ahead and pull the big one out and wreck about 14 cars. So yes, they have now made Atlanta a mini super speedway, and it's pack racing. It's exactly what they advertised, and tomorrow's going to be even more interesting with 500 miles, 325 laps of just really close corner racing from start to finish. It's going to be interesting. Not exactly sure how Draftkings will end up working out, but I'm leaning much more heavily on the information from the Super Speedway packages, more so than the Atlanta packages. But either way, I am doing this live. Currently, it's 11:25 on the East Coast, and if you have any questions or anything, hit me up in the chat. I'll try my best to answer anything that you put out there. And just remember, it's free advice, so that's all it's worth. It's free. But either way, welcome, and let's kind of get into breaking some of this down and what to possibly expect tomorrow when green flag drops a little after 3-ish. All right, we're at Atlanta. I'm calling it an intermediate super speedway. It is a 1.54 mile track with now 28 degrees in the turns and 5 degrees on the straightaways. The race length, as I said, is 325 laps. Dominator points will consist of 227.5 points coming from 81.25 laps led and 146.25 fast laps. Dominators, at least in the truck and in Xfinity race today, Dominator points won't mean much at all, and they typically don't at the super speedways. You'll have, we will have a decent amount of laps led by a couple guys. Kind of what they were saying was it was a little bit tough to pass for the lead unless you had somebody giving you a push. Now, that we are talking about two different types of vehicles, and the Cup car is a beast of its own. So with that being said, they might be able to pass on the bottom side more so or better than the Xfinity trucks, but probably not. Typically, it kind of, once super speedways, it kind of follows suit a little bit. So I'm not expecting a whole lot of Dominator points for one particular driver. I think we will see them take it fairly easy for stage 1. So my guess is Ryan Blaney, starting outside pole or at least on the front row, may end up getting that lead, and he may not relinquish it until after stage 1, after they do pit stops. So, but with that being said, let's get into the the track configuration. What did they do to the track? They took it from 24 degrees of banking to 28 degrees of banking. The transition apron's only 18 degrees in banking now, where it used to be 4. So you definitely didn't get down on the transforming apron, and the apron's only 2 degrees. You definitely don't want to come off of the banking and hit either one of those. You will end up spinning out. And actually, NASCAR has said no passing under the double white line. Usually it's a double yellow line at Talladega, Daytona, but it's a double white line at Atlanta. So can't pass below that. I'm not sure anybody ever could if they wanted to be perfectly honest. Maybe on the backstretch, but even there it's kind of treacherous. Most of the big wreck happened coming off of turn 2 and going down the backstretch earlier tonight. So yeah, so that's kind of the new configuration. When I was doing the track comparisons, I was looking at the old Atlanta Raceway, Auto Club, and now mostly Daytona and Talladega. So this is going to be a lot of place differentials, drivers coming from the back. We'll kind of look at Ryan here. What we're looking at here is in this first part of the section. I'm not going to cover this because I covered it in my video 2 or 3 days ago. You can go back and watch that for a more detailed breakdown. But this is in the last 5 races, so that included 2 Atlanta races, the Auto Club from earlier this year, and Daytona from earlier this year, and the Talladega race in the fall last year. So Ryan had 1 win, 1 top 5, 3 top 10s, 5 top 20s, 42.3 DraftKings average at those 5 tracks, an 8.6 average finish. He finished 5th at the Atlanta fall race last year. And then this over here is 7 total races at Atlanta with 1 win, 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, and 5 top 20s. I'm probably not going to cover much of this section as I go through these drivers to make it not as long of a video. But up here is the new post-practice ranking and where they're starting. Qualifying got rained out on Friday, so all they had was practice. So they are basing it on the crazy formula that they came up with during COVID to get away from qualifying, so the drivers could literally show up on race day, race, and then leave. So they didn't have practice or qualifying during COVID, so they went with this metric. And because of where Ryan Blaney was currently in points and where he finished the race last week and so on, Ryan's starting second. With that and practice speeds and things of that nature, he got moved from the number 1 power ranking to a number 3. And here is where I'm probably going to land on how much of an ownership rank I plan on having for Ryan. So we'll kind of go through the rest of these drivers. I'm not going to go through all of their detailed stats, more of where they're starting and how much of an ownership percentage I'm going to end up having of that particular driver, and who I'm really like, who I kind of don't like, and who I really don't like. And there are definitely a few of those on both sides. Once again, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and if you have any questions, comments, or whatever, throw it in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to try to give you whatever advice I can. All right, so next in line here, Kyle Larson, number 1 now on the power ranking, mostly because of his starting spot of 21st. He also races very well at 1.5 mile tracks, but lots of PD upside here with Kyle. I think whatever hiccup they had last week with the engine troubles, I'm sure that Hendrick has probably worked that out, and I will have a very, very high share of Kyle Larson. 35 to 40% of my lineups will probably end up having at least some ownership of Kyle Larson. Next here is Chase Elliott, 10,300. He is starting 6th. I'll tell you what, hold on, let me pull one other stat up that I've not put here that I liked. YouTube is not receiving enough video to make such. Whatever. Sorry if it happens to be buffering on you. Either way, let me look at practice speeds. So fastest in here, I'll just pull this over so we can look at it. Practice speeds. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had the fastest practice speed. Now remember, they were racing and they were practicing in pack style racing. So Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had the fastest, and you can see that. I mean, their speeds were extremely close, and their times were extremely close. I mean, the slowest down here will kind of go up from BJ. So Brad K, 30.222 was his time, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was 29.78. I mean, we're talking less than half of a second between 34th and 1st. So all these practice speeds are very, very similar. They were all done inside of pack racing, so not the practice speeds do mean something. We can look at best 10 lap consecutive averages, and that's kind of all over the board. Also look at the speeds. I mean, 183 down to 181. So within 2 miles an hour of each other, even for 10 lap consecutive averages. So everybody was about the same. We don't have any information on single lap solo runs for any of these drivers. So we'll just have to kind of go on where they're starting, what they've done in the past, our ownership percentages. So Chase Elliott, 10,300. 15th on the power ranking, mostly because of his starting spot of 6th. I will have Chase in about 20 to 25% of my lineups. Denny Hamlin and Joe Gibbs Racing, I'm fading a lot of Joe Gibbs Racing, except for probably Martin Truex Jr., who was starting fairly well in the back. But they've just struggled with bad luck. I think part of it's bad luck. I think part of it is just something's not quite clicking with Toyota. Kurt Busch is one of the best Toyota drivers this year, and I mean, not that he's a bad driver, it's just that would have been very unexpected because he's literally brand new to 2311 racing and brand new to Toyota. So all in all, Toyota's just been having rough luck. Being a super speedway, that does take some of that equation out because there's just a little bit more of a crapshoot. So I'm still going to fade away from Denny Hamlin and probably only have him in 5 to 10% of my lineups. He is starting 15th, which does give him some PD upside potential if he can get himself into the top 5. But I don't know. Until something happens with Denny, I'm going to continue to fade him until he proves me wrong and makes me pay for it. Joey Logano, 9,900, starting 3rd. And because of his starting spot, he doesn't have a whole lot of PD upside potential, but a lot of PD downside. So moved him down to 17th on the power ranking and probably looking at 10 to 15% ownership. All right, next in line here, Kyle Busch, starting 4th, kind of in the same boat as Joey Logano, starting very far up front, has a potential of getting inside the big one. But out of all the drivers that are starting up front, I think Ryan Blaney or Kyle Busch probably would be one of the 2 cars that do end up leading a fair amount of early laps. Kyle also is one of the Toyota drivers who seems to has bad luck and has issues, but always seems to find his way to the front by the end of the race. So finishing position and PD upside, as I've talked about, are going to be 2 of the biggest factors on points. Fast laps won't mean much of a hill of beans because, as we saw, everybody seems fast when you're racing in a pack. So got Kyle now listed as a power ranking of 6th, and I'll have him in about 30 to 35% of lineups. Kevin Harvick next in line here at 9,600, starting 8th, and he's now currently 10th on the power ranking, and I'm going to have about the same amount of ownership in Kevin as I do Kyle. Kevin does have a little bit of PD upside here, but Kevin also hasn't shown me in the last year and a half that he has the ability to win races. So, I mean, if he can finish 5th, depending on who else finishes around him, may or may not put him into the money. So, I do like Kevin. I think he has the potential to win here, and he has been showing a lot more patience as he has become more the elder in the sport. So I think Kevin will have a decent finishing day, top 5, maybe even battle for a top 3 or even a win. So 30-35% ownership on Kevin Harvick. William Byron, 9,400, starting 12th, 25th now in the power ranking. William has just had tough luck at super speedways, and he's had tough luck at Atlanta. So all indications are he's probably gonna have tough luck. That's probably gonna come back and bite me. He's probably gonna go and win the race this weekend, but I'm fading William. I just don't like where he's at, and I think he may get himself into a top 10. I'm not sure he makes it up to a top 5, which is not enough to give me any real potential as an optimal lineup candidate. So William Byron, I'm fading 5 to 10%. Martin Truex Jr., I talked about him earlier, starting 26. He's one of the drivers that's starting the furthest back. He also doesn't race bad at super speedways. He just always seems to have a little bit of bad luck. But something just tells me I think Martin's going to end up having a pretty good weekend this weekend, starting 26th. Second on the power ranking now. I'm going to have him about 35 to 40% of my lineups. Once again, make sure you like or subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure you hit me up. All right, next in line here, Tyler Reddick, who has been having a very, very good year, just hasn't quite gotten the finishes he wanted until last week, where he had a top 3, but 9,000, and with that great finish, he now going to start 5th. So that starting that far up, I think I'm going to fade on Tyler this week. I think he's somebody that we could definitely look at for after we get past this new Atlanta configuration and we get past road course at Coda next week. I think Tyler's definitely somebody that we can target back in on, but for right now, I'm going to be fading Tyler Reddick and have about 5 to 10% ownership on Tyler. All right, next in line here, we've got Alex Bowman, 8,800, starting 11th. Starting that far up, and he doesn't necessarily perform that well at super speedways. I'm also going to be fading Alex Bowman. There's just better drivers, at least at a less expensive price, and price really isn't going to matter for this weekend. It's the same Daytona Talladega thought process that you would typically have, and or at least that I have, and you're not going to spend all 50,000. Not even close. You probably could easily have $3,000, $4,000, even $5,000 left over and have an optimal lineup. So we'll get into those drivers here in just minutes, but Alex Bowman now power ranked at 28th. I'm not going to completely say no, but 5 to 10% ownership and Alex Bowman. Brad Keselowski, 8,600, starting 24th. I think this is the weekend that Brad and Roush Fenway Keselowski RFK Racing turned the corner, and I think Brad ends up with a pretty good finish here. 4th on the power ranking, and I'm going to have him about 30 to 35% of my lineups. He's got good PD upside starting 24th. So that's just my gut feeling on it. A lot of this is kind of a gut feeling. I'm using some stats to back up my feelings, but Brad's had a tough year, just like Denny has to start this year. The difference is Brad's starting in 24th and Denny's starting in 15th. It's a 9-point place differential. So I'll take Brad over Denny and cross my fingers that Brad ends up having a top 5 type of day. Kurt Busch, 8,400, starting 9th. You're kind of getting into the danger territory of not sure Kurt gets better than 9th, but anything's possible when you're at a super speedway. I'm not completely fading Kurt. I'm going to have him about 15 to 20% of my lineups. Chase Briscoe, our winner from last week. You win and you get the pole for the next week. Not necessarily, but that's very typical. If you win, you end up on the pole. So 8,200. He's been racing really well, and even on super speedways at Daytona, he raced pretty well. So I'm not going to completely fade him. I think he does have the potential, along with Ryan Blaney, to potentially lead the first 30, 40 laps of this thing, which, I mean, gives you an extra 10 to 15 points. And if you can finish in the top 5, that could be enough to say that his price is worth his value. So because he's 8,200, and I think he could lead, 20, 30, 40 laps, I'm not going to completely fade him here. I typically don't like the pole sitter. I still don't really love the pole sitter here because there is no PD upside. There's only PD downside with him. But I'm not going to completely fade Chase Briscoe. He's been having a phenomenal year so far this year. Ross Chastain, 8,000, starting 7th. And yeah, I know. The last 2 weeks I've said, nope, I'm fading Ross Chastain, and it bites me every week. I'm fading him again. Something just does. I don't have that feeling that Ross is going to end up. I mean, he was racing in the truck race. He made it all the way from 35th starting up and to the front and led a few laps, but then towards the end ended up having trouble. So he still was a decent play because he started in 35th. Well, you're starting 7th in the Cup race, so I don't know. I'm gonna fade Ross again this week, and it probably will bite me in the backside. But either way, I'm not completely. I'll have probably about 5% of Austin Cindric, same thing, 7,800, starting 16th. 9th on the power ranking. It's just Austin, after the Daytona 500 win and qualifying super well, he just has not been able to back any of that up with this new car, with being on the new racing service at Atlanta. I'm gonna fade Austin this week, and we'll pick him back up. He's a really good road course racer. He, depending on where he qualifies for Circuits of the America next weekend, maybe I look at picking him up then. But I'm kind of fading on Austin Cindric this week. Christopher Bell, 7,700, starting 27th, 21st on the power ranking. This is probably my second favorite Joe Gibbs driver, and I'll probably have him in 10 to 15% ownership range. So Martin Truex would probably be first, and Christopher Bell would be second. Denny Hamlin's down at the bottom, along with Kurt Busch. We'll find out where Bubba falls here in just a minute. Eric Almirola, who's been having a phenomenal year, starting 10th. I don't love it. I think there's better value. Heck, Christopher Bell for $100 more is better, in my opinion, better value, because I think Christopher Bell could end up with a top 10. So I'm fading Eric this week. He's an okay restrictor plate super speedway racer, but he's not a great mile-and-a-half racer. So I don't know which one's going to show up. I think super speedway shows up more, but there's a lot of risk there, and starting 10th, not a whole lot of PD upside. Austin Dillon, 7,400, starting 17th. Power rates of 14th. I'll have him in 10 to 15%. He's actually pretty good at mile-and-a-halfs, and he's pretty good at super speedways. I think Austin could end up having a decent day. Doesn't provide a whole lot of PD upside, but there is some. So I'll have him in 10 to 15% of my lineups. All right, Bubba Wallace, here we go, 7,300, starting 19th. He's not starting further back than Christopher Bell, so I would prefer to have Christopher Bell over Bubba Wallace if we're talking about Toyota drivers. But I do have him ranked as a power ranking of 8, which is better than Christopher Bell because Bubba did win the Talladega race and he finished second at Daytona. So, if he can get himself into a top 5, he'll probably make the optimal lineup. So, not completely fading him. I'll have about the same ownership I do of Bubba as I do Christopher Bell. All right, our next grouping here, we start off with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 7,100, starting 28th, and I'll have him in 10 to 15%. he is a fairly aggressive driver. He typically runs decently well at super speedways, not so much on mile and a halfs. And after watching the truck and Xfinity race, I think he may be too aggressive of a driver for the size track that we're at with the package that we're running. So I do think there's some PD upside here with Ricky. I'm not completely fading him out, but I also think that he could have, I mean, he might get himself into a top 20. Not sure he gets himself to a top 10 unless some weird things happen and we have a big one and it takes a bunch of people out and Ricky is not involved in it. Then that's probably going to bite me in the backside. But more than likely, I don't think he's going to have much more than probably 15% ownership across the board. So I wouldn't tell you not to take him, but I think Eric Jones is a better play. I think there's a better plays out there, but I mean, Ricky's starting 28th. There's a lot of PD upside potential there. Next in line here, Eric Jones, 6,900, starting 23rd. Upside here. He's been having quietly a phenomenal year. If he can just stop wrecking with 5 laps to go, he would have much better finishes. And I think Eric can hopefully keep it together this weekend. Hopefully he can miss the big one or not cause the big one. And if he does, I think he's got a good potential to have a decent amount of PD upside here. So I've got him in about 25 to 30% of my lineups. Daniel Suarez, 6,800, starting 13th. Daniel's been quietly having a really good year this year. I just don't like his starting spot. That's pretty much all I don't like about him. I think he could easily get himself a top 10. I'm not sure he gets all the way to the top 5 without some carnage happening in the race. So I'll have him in a couple lineups, but that's about it. Not completely fading, not completely getting him out, but I'll have him in a couple lineups. Chris Buescher, 6,700. Teammates with Brad K, starting 14th. That he doesn't have as much PD upside as, but there is a little PD. My lineups. Now, Michael McDowell, 6,600. I think this is a much better value play. Starting 29th. I think he is somebody that we could definitely look at. He won Daytona 500 last year. He always tends to run fairly well at restrictor plates. He's not the best at mile and a half style tracks, but I think because of the pack racing and his ability to be very patient, I think he's got great potential to finish well inside a top 15, maybe even top 10, which would probably almost put him definitely in the optimal lineup. So I'll have him in about 35 to 40% of my lineups. All right, Harrison Burton, 6,400, starting 31st. He was having a great race at Daytona until he ended up getting put into the wall by Brad K. So I really like the PD upside here from Harrison. I think he has the ability to run very well at restrictor plates. When he was in the Xfinity Series, he raced really well on mile and a halfs. So between those two combinations, I'm going to be fairly heavy on Harrison Burton, 35 to 40%. Lots of PD upside potential here. And he's the only Xfinity driver who hasn't had a decent finish so far. And I think it's just his turn. So it's a gut feeling. And I'm going to be fairly heavy on Harrison Burton. All right, Cole Custer, 6,300, starting 20th. Cole's got some PD upside potential here, but not much. I think he might get himself to a top 15. I'm not completely fading him, but I'm not going to be heavy on him either. So 5 to 10% on lineups. Justin Haley, 6,100. I would much rather take Justin Haley, starting 2 spots further back at 6,100. Not going full in on Justin. If Justin were starting 30th, I would be much heavier on Justin Haley, but Justin Haley does extremely well at super speedways, at least in the Xfinity Series he did, and does actually fairly well in the old Cup cars at super speedways. So I'm going to have about 10 to 15% ownership on Justin Haley. Ty Dillon, $6,000, starting 18th. I don't think he improves his position at all. He would need a lot of carnage to get a much better finishing position. I'm fading Ty Dillon completely out. If I were starting 28th to 30th, I would have some ownership stake in him. But I don't think he races any better than an 18th place car. So I am fading completely off of Ty Dillon this week. Noah Gragson, 5,800. His second start in the Cup Series. The first one was at Daytona, where he ended up having some issues, but Noah ran fairly well until he got involved in a couple of wrecks. Xfinity race this afternoon, but Noah Gragson starting 30th. Lots of PD upside potential here. I think he gets himself potentially at least a top 15, if not better. I'm very, very heavy on Noah Gragson. Gives you a great value with a lot of PD upside. Todd Gilliland, 5,600, who had a great race last weekend, is starting 25th. I mean, I would much rather take Noah Gragson over Todd Gilliland. Just my personal preference and gut feeling. But Todd's really starting to come on his own in the Cup Series. At least he's starting to get better finishes. Now, when I say better finishes, I'm saying he's getting himself into the top 25 to top 20 range, not top 10 by any means. But he is starting to get a better grasp on finishing races and finishing better than where he started in the Cup Series. Starting 25th, I don't like the starting spot. I think he could finish where he starts. So, no real big plus there. David Reagan, probably my heaviest owned driver so far. I will be overweight on David Reagan, but I expect that most people are going to be extremely heavy on David Reagan. Starting 35th, 2 spots from last. Not a whole lot of other room but to go up. He drives mile and a half really, really well, and super speedways really, really well. I'm super heavy on David Reagan this weekend, but also remember, he's going to be very heavily owned. I bet you he has probably an ownership somewhere in the 40 to 45, if not 50% range, because of his starting spot and his price tag. You put David Reagan in your lineup and shouldn't have a problem starting whoever else you want out there. So, very, very heavy on David Reagan for tomorrow's race. Corey LaJoie, 5,300, starting 33rd. Decent amount of PD upside here. I didn't go too far on Corey. He had issues last weekend and just hasn't had the best luck. He's been kind of finishing where he's starting, and if he is improving, he's only improving 2 or 3 spots. So I need to see some more out of Corey LaJoie and some better finishes. And maybe this is the weekend that he does it. Got a lot of carnage up in front of him. But either way, I'll have him in a couple lines. But pretty much from here on down, I'm going to be completely fading all of these drivers out, even though the Biff is back. 5,200 starting 37th. He's starting dead last on the field. He has no other room but to go up or stay where he is. If he stays where he is, then gets you 4 points. Yeah, I just, I think the card colors, the paint schemes he's running are really cool. But he's 50 some odd years old. He's still a decent race car driver. He still could probably beat in equal equipment. I think he beats a third of the field. So, but I'm not going to have any ownership stake on him. Every time he's run so far, they've had issues or troubles. They don't have a top tier pit crew. I mean, the crew chief's pretty good, but they've struggled. I'm fading completely on Greg Biffle and pretty much everybody else all the way down through here. Josh Bilicki, BJ McLeod. I mean, if there's anybody I was going to take, it would probably be 1 or 2 ownerships of BJ, but there's enough value above these guys that, in my opinion, will have better finishes. So either way, from the truck and Xfinity, I did break down the optimal lineups just to kind of give you an idea of what happened earlier at the truck race. One car started in the top 5. One car only in the top 10. The next closest was Ben Rhodes, who started 15th, but he finished second. Huge PD upside swing. Same thing with, I mean, look at 19th the first, 25th the 5th, 15th the second, 34th the 15th, 18th the 9th, and Ty Majeski was the only one who started in the top 5 and finished in the top 5. But that's the power of the PD upside swing along with a decent finish. So, I mean, we had one kind of dominator. I'm not sure you can call somebody that leads only 22 laps of 135 a dominator. I'm not. I don't know if you call that a dominator. It was not a dominator, but at a super speedway, I guess it potentially is. But I don't really necessarily call it that. But he did lead the most laps of everybody in the optimal lineup. 5 people were place differentials. 2 of these guys, only 2 of them were value, which is $7,500 or less. But 4 had top 5 finishes. We had $400 left on that one. Now the big one is the Xfinity Series, where we had $5,300 left on the optimal lineup, and 1/2 kind of dominators. I mean, AJ led for 41 laps and Austin Hill led for 27 laps, but out of 172 laps, is that really somebody who dominated the race? No. I'm calling it a half of a dominator. That's probably what the Truck Series was half a dominator. But either way, Austin Hill, so we had one person in the top 10, nobody started in the top 5, and one other person started top 20. So one in the top 10 starts and one in the top 20 starts, and everybody else was 24, 26, 28, and 32. It was all PD upside. That's what I'm saying. That's the power of super speedways and when the big one comes out. Because, I mean, as you can see, fast laps, Austin Hill had 6 fast laps, Riley Hurts had 4, Massey had 3, Weatherman had 5, Allmendinger had 3. I mean, Allmendinger led 41 laps, but only had 3 of the fastest laps. So we're not that worried about fast laps or laps led. It's all about finishing position and upside. So you don't need to spend all your money. Find guys that are value who can get a good finish in the top 10, and get 15, 20 points of PD upside, and they're going to make the optimal lineup. But either way, that's all I have for tonight. The reason I'm doing this on a Saturday night was because I've got my son's baseball tournament, and travel baseball is back, so I will be doing these potentially on Saturday nights, potentially on Sunday mornings, or early afternoons. It'll be all over the place, but I'll typically know when I post the Thursday/Friday video, the pre-qualifying video where I break down the drivers in more detail and their past history at the track and similar tracks. But either way, if you have any questions or comments, make sure you hit me up in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer with whatever free advice I give you. I'll try to sway you in the right direction, but just remember it was free. So make sure you hit that like, subscribe button, and come back and check me out on Thursday when we go and break down all of the things that happened at Atlanta, and we dive into Circuits of America. Have a great weekend. Good luck. Let me know how you finish, and enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good one. Thanks.